Hello guys, that's 12530 here. Oh boy, where do I even begin? So, let me just go over this quickly. So, earlier, as in I've just watched this not too like a few minutes ago. This was posted 6 days ago, and it was posted by Levelcap. His video stating did BF5 kill the franchise? Now, it's not specifically what he says is being the issue, because it's not something wrong with his content, it's more addressing the Battlefield player base. Namely, some of the arguments I've seen. Now, this has gotten me quite annoyed. Mainly because of the fact that people are spouting so much shit. And some of it is wrong, factually, and some of it is just opinions, and some of that makes sense. But I'm going to go over some of these. I'm not going to name names, I'm just going to see some of the things I saw written down, and I'm going to also address my thought on Battlefield and stuff like that overall, as I am pretty much a Battlefield YouTuber at this rate. Okay, firstly, a lot of people were talking about which games are better and which games are worse. Namely, I had constantly seen people saying that Battlefield 1 was trash, and that the game should go back to games like Battlefield 3. Now, firstly, I want to give out my straight opinion. 1. If you were a console player, for someone like me who played console and who has played PC and console for these games, because I've played PC Battlefield 3 a few times, thanks to one of my uncles. If you're not playing on PC, Battlefield 3 was a terrible game. And I know all the elitist PC players out there are going to complain. Say like, oh, just get a PC, stop being a console pleb. It doesn't matter. The fact is that we are all people who play games. Some of us may not be fortunate enough to have a computer. Some of us may have other things may have limitations on what we can use. Thing is, though, is that overall, is that at the time Battlefield 3 had the main issue of the fact that consoles could not hold it. That is not an issue. That is an issue with the game, but not in a sense to where I can be mad at it. Difference is, though, is I can most certainly say that the game was not the greatest Battlefield as some people are proclaiming it to be. Secondly, people talking a lot of shit about BF1, saying that it was just a train wreck. It was just what they did off the back of Battlefield Hardline as the train wreck it was. I completely denounce this, mainly because of the fact of 3 things. 1, yes, it did keep the same graphics as Battlefield 1, not Battlefield 1, Hardline. But the thing is that the system put in place and the way the game functioned was fairly different. And this is coming from somebody who does Battlefield Hardline reviews. I would know. And considering the fact that I've played Battlefield 1 is my 3rd most played Battlefield, I think. Yeah, something like that. Either way. Second reason. Yes, the game is more casual. Yes, the game isn't exactly, how I say it, the most... trying to put this in the words, but it wasn't exactly the most Battlefield up to that point that we had seen. Thing is, though, is that doesn't matter, because the situations that they're put in could not be fixed under the way Battlefield had been running. Namely, the fact that the way Battlefield and Battlefield 4 and all that were running it couldn't function that way. It couldn't function that way in a World War I setting. So, I already think that the way they chose to do Battlefield 1 is probably the best way they could have handled it. So, from a design standpoint, it makes sense why it changed. Thirdly, to all those people who say, oh, they keep making it more like Call of Duty and stuff like that. Here, I have 2 points to go against that. 1. No. Just no. There are a few things from Call of Duty that Battlefield has borrowed in terms of, ideas, but that does not that does not constitute them as just copying Battlefield or just turning it into Call of Duty. This is because, the fact being, many games have similar systems. I'm sure, like, good examples, CSGO and Call of Duty have some similar systems. They're not all the same, but they have had similar things. And the thing is that there's nothing wrong with trying to use a system that someone else thought was good and trying to appropriate it into something to make it better. That's not an issue. Thing is that yes, are there some issues with the Call of Duty formula? Yes, I admit this fully, as a Call of Duty player from my early life and still now. Thing is with that is that my main gripe with that argument is that they are nowhere near close to each other. And funnily enough, the way Battlefield has been heading actually makes it look like Call of Duty being the better game in terms of actual, like, content and stability. So, I don't think, so for people saying that, oh, they're copying Call of Duty, I'm like, well, depending on what you want them, depending on what you're accusing them of copying from, I would actually recommend that being a good thing. Namely, the fact of copying, so, like, how much they've been putting out content, or copying some of their systems to make it so it's easier for players to figure out what's going on, so on and so forth. And this goes to my second mini point of that, and that is the fact that it hasn't changed that much. Yes, Battlefield 1 followed off of Hardline. Yes, the game doesn't seem as, like, they are very different from Battlefield 4. Difference is, though, is the fact that it doesn't matter. The game is still Battlefield, and I can still play that game and immediately know it is a Battlefield game. Not only that, every system put in place there not only seemed to fit the way the war was, but it also seemed to be all well balanced wise. Now, there were a few balance issues with Battlefield 1, and there were stability issues and so on and so forth. The thing is though, is that there was nothing bad enough to call the game trash. Now, if it's just your opinion, then yes. But the thing is, you cannot compare it to Hardline and say that they are the same game, or to say that it is just as bad as Hardline, when Battlefield 1 has a great amount of content now. Granted, did it have some content issues at release? Yes. You have the fact that it is probably one of the most stable Battlefields known to date, and that was at release. The time to kill, yes, was slow in the beginning, but they did change that towards the end, and they actually did revert back like Battlefield 5, and point still being. So, that's the first mini rant to get finished. Second part, Battlefield 4, oh boy, people were talking to me, well, not telling me in comments, but I was reading the comments. A lot of people are saying Battlefield 4 was like trash, or that Battlefield 4 was the last great game. Virtually, I deny both of these points, because I don't think that's true. I think the last good Battlefield game was 1, simply because of the fact that Battlefield 1 did what it set out to do in a very good way, and even with its gripes and issues that it does have, it has been able to be pushed past those and looked out as a good game by overall people. And when you go and look at people saying Battlefield 4 is trash, okay, if you talk about the first few months, or at least until the spring patch, I can give you that. It had 2 DLCs out. I think it was getting towards its 3rd. But the issue was it was still difficult to play the game. You would still get constant crashings, and you would still have a lot of issues. Before the spring patch, I can completely agree with people saying objectively that it was a bad game. Issue is, it's not that way anymore. The spring patch is done. We got our fixes. We got our netcode reset. We got our frickin' guns balanced out. We got everything set up. We got all the DLCs. We have everything we need. And this game, coming from somebody who originally was a Call of Duty player and loved Call of Duty, and I will still play Call of Duty till the ends of the earth. I own every single game since COD 4 and play all of them. I can still say that this game is my most played game of all time. This game I have played over 700 hours in. I'm getting towards 800. And if you count my alt account, I am over 800, going into 850 hours played on this game. This is my most played video game of all time. So, for something to be called trash that I can play so often, yes, I can understand it's just personal opinion. But the thing is that nobody has proven with me factual evidence that after the spring patch and after they have fixed the issues of Battlefield 4, that this game is not worth playing. That this game, outside of subjective nature, is a bad game. Okay, second main rant over. Time for the final point and the reason why I'm making this video. As of this moment, the Battlefield community is very divided. And though I'd hate to admit it, Levelcap has kind of made this much more forefronting. Namely because of the fact that he is stating his opinion without showing, like, he's stating his opinion while showing some factual evidence, but the thing is that nobody is taking a stand to show the fact that, like, the Battlefield community in itself is a very divisive one at the moment. Namely, you have people who like some of the games, people hate some of the games. You have the PC players versus the console players, because the PC players hate the console players, and sometimes console players are kind of idiots. Point all being is that the community is divided to a point to where nobody can agree on anything anymore. You have these little sects of people that that think their own way, and that's it. Namely, you have the people who hate Battlefield 1 and think that Battlefield 4 and 3 were the best games. You have the people who don't think anything past Bad Company 2 was a good game. You have the people that think BS3 was the best Battlefield ever made, and basically is the best thing ever made. Then you have the people who think Battlefield 1 was the greatest game ever made and that every other Battlefield was trash. You have the people who even like Hardline, even though I like Hardline, but I don't think it's a great game. But then you have the final one, which is me, the people who like all of the Battlefields mentioned in the comment section constantly, and can prove that they were all great games, at least after they were fixed from their issues. And for people like me, I'm sure this is very annoying, because on one hand, I can agree with everyone else wholeheartedly. Battlefield 5 is a terrible game. It is a terrible game at this moment, and it probably will end up being a terrible game in the end. Thing is that doesn't mean you have to go around telling other people that the game is, just by your subjective nature, that a game is trash and trying to pass it off as fact. Especially if it's just out of spite for DICE or for EA, because they haven't gotten your game up. They haven't gotten the Battlefield 5 you spend $60 on up to par. Which, like I said, I spent $60 on this game. I know your pain. Issue being is it doesn't matter. As a community, we cannot just divide ourselves based among our subjective preferences. We must not stand divided against a fricking company and a slightly, I wouldn't say incompetent, because I know their DICE isn't that incompetent, but I would say a underperforming title and an underperforming studio. And we shouldn't divide ourselves just because of the fact that we have different opinions on which game is better. And this is where my next video is probably going to come in, because I was going to make a video talking about tips and tricks in Battlefield, but this has really pissed me off. Naming point is, I'm going to talk about in my next video, or maybe on stream, I don't know, I might just stream it, and that is that overall, I can honestly say that after this point, originally, I believe Call of Duty had the most toxic fan base, and at the time it did. I can admit that wholeheartedly. As a Call of Duty player, I know what it's like to be toxic, and I know what it's like to see toxic people. Issue is that now I believe Battlefield has become the toxic fan base. Not only with the supremacy clause of some of these people, so many people just be trying to think they're better than everyone else, and then you have the fact of the people that just simply complain about every little thing and then get into arguments within their own community while shutting out other people. And I say this, you cannot take a moral high ground whilst being in the Battlefield community anymore, because everyone in your community is not only treating others like shit, but they're treating each other like shit. And I'll be seeing you guys all later.